a really strange thing was created called U.S. citizenship, which had nothing to do with the original sovereign citizens of the Americans. It's a very strange operation, in fact. The other compounded fraud that they're pulling now to cover up all of that even is all this thing about the United Nations. Our Constitution...
Well, we don't want to go into the United Nations. I agree with you, the United Nations is a fraud on every count, but I want to get back to your basic idea here that you're saying that because they use these programs in a way that you think do not have the effects that they promise, their real motivation is powerless. Do you have anything more direct to show us that these people really want power, or do you think that's pretty obvious?
Well,
I guess you could say it's pretty obvious in this point of view. If you take most of the people that want to run for president and ask them why they want to, they get trapped because they can't think of anything beyond a few obvious bromides to say. And, in fact, do you remember that interview with Teddy Kennedy that was done by Roger, what's his name, Roger Mudd, who's a friend of the Kennedy family? I think he makes your point just as well as anybody. And it was supposed to be a friendly interview, and he asked Teddy Kennedy, well, why do you want to run for president? This is several years ago. And Kennedy had no answer. He just never even thought of the question. And this is obviously true, for instance, of Bush, who had no program. It's obviously true of Clinton, who had no program. To them, running is an end in itself. The power is an end in itself. I don't even think you have to go into the fraud of the programs. The fact that they don't even have a program makes a difference. Listen, Bill, I'm lucky enough this week to have quite a number of callers, so I'll give you one more word and then we've got to go on.
Yeah, this is excellent. In fact, I think it all came about simply just because there was this greed to begin with, whereby they started doing things like clipping the coin of the realm. And then when they invented paper money, they came up with these schemes.
Well, who's greed? The greed of the politicians, you mean?
Well, mainly first the bankers behind the governments, and then it just got out of hand where they had a tiger by the tail.
Well, if you let me just interrupt you here, because I got to jump on to some of these other callers, but I would just make this suggestion. Every time you find something that you think greed is the cause of the evil, look a little deeper and see if the people are actually benefiting from this scheme or if it's just a short-range, momentary thing. You know, you can swallow poison and say you're greedy and it tastes great, but then it kills you. And one of the shows we're going to do here is all the cases in which it seems like people can get away with dishonesty and fraud and really advance their own interest, but I would maintain in all those cases they really harm themselves and that honesty is a prerequisite of success in life. But I got to cut you off here, Bill. Thanks very much for your contribution. Call again.
Thank you.
We enjoy your call. Chris, I'd like to hear about, you think the liberals and conservatives have the same agenda, is that right?
Well, yes, I certainly do.
Well, welcome to KIEV.
Well, thank you for your time, sir. You know, our Constitution and Bill of Rights, it supersedes all other laws, and it gives the people the right to govern themselves as they see fit. And how many of us have been dismayed over the passage of a new law with the knowledge that the act would be impractical on the street or it just doesn't sound legal? And this has been going on for my entire lifetime. What's right is wrong and what's wrong is right. And when Eisenhower was in office, and Nixon and Reagan and Bush and Ford, you know, the agenda was always against our Constitution of the United States, and I was just wondering what you thought about that.
Well, I agree. If the Constitution of the United States protects individual rights, and rights means life, liberty, private property, and the pursuit of happiness, anytime an act of Congress or of the states favors some group at the expense of another, whether it's gives some group special advantages, trade subsidies, franchises, whatever, or special help from the government, special advertising by the government, special bureau to look after. All of that has to come from somebody, since government is not a productive agency. And it has to come from the government robbing Peter to pay Paul. From the very outset, therefore, we have, as soon as you depart from laissez-faire capitalism, you're engaging in some form of robbery, which is justified by those who do it in the name of altruism. You're robbing the rich to pay the poor. But of course, what really happens is you pauperize the rich, and the money doesn't help the poor either because it filters through the whole bureaucracy. And so you get the situation that the rich have no incentive. This is when you get to the extremer cases, such as we're in right now. The rich have no incentive to produce. There are no jobs. The poor have no place to turn, and everybody comes crashing down. And the only solution to that is get the government off the backs of the country. Get the government to function as its proper, as a policeman that is there to protect us from the initiation of physical force at home or abroad, by a police force at home, by an army abroad. And once we have peace guaranteed, criminals apprehended, then it's the most honest and the most productive man that wins, and everybody wins. Instead of cutting down the rich and leaving the poor with nothing, everybody wins, and that's what we got to do. But that's the opposite of conservative and liberal. Throw out both sets of controls. The only control we want is control over violent crime at home or abroad, or fraud. Control over the violation of individual rights. But there is no party that advocates that. Thanks again for your comment. We're going to take a commercial break right now.
Thank you.
12:27, few seconds short of that. My name is Leonard Peikoff. Our subject, liberals or conservatives. David, what can I do for you today on KIEV?
Well, Dr. Peikoff, I'm kind of mixed up. How would I vote? I don't have many choices. I've got Ross Perot, who wants to raise taxes to solve the problems, and Senator Dole, who helped George Bush raise taxes after he said he wouldn't, and also Dole supports the giveaway programs to fund the farmers of the United States and raise food prices, and then I've got Bill Clinton, so I don't know what the hell to do.
You have doubts what to do about Bill Clinton, Dave?
Pardon me?
Do you have any doubts what to do about Bill Clinton?
Well, I don't know. Maybe I'd vote for Clinton, and we'd hit bottom faster, and maybe get a good candidate. I don't know. I just.
So you want me to tell you which of all of the candidates?
Who should I vote for?
Who should you vote for?
I mean,
that's a really good question. I wish I had a very simple, straightforward answer to it. I'll tell you in a moment what I'm going to do, but I'll tell you, I've been a lifelong Republican, but I saw so many Republicans do so many dreadful things that at a certain point I decided there are cases in which it's better to get rid of a really bad Republican, even if a worse Democrat comes in, because if you kick out the bad Republicans, there's a chance that the better wing of the Republicans will come to power. So just for a moment to look at the last election, I, believe it or not, voted for Clinton, and I announced that I was voting for Clinton at a time when it wasn't even certain that Clinton would be the nominee. I made a public speech in Boston, and I said, I'm going to vote for the Democrat if it's Jesse Jackson, if it's Mario Cuomo. I don't care who it is, to get Bush out of there, because Bush is a catastrophe for the Republican Party. Here is a man who stands for nothing. He was a Rockefeller Republican, and I thought it was utterly crucial, and that if he was completely repudiated, maybe a better type of Republican would come in. And sure enough, thankfully, the rest of the country took the same attitude, not because of me. I wish I had that kind of influence. And Bush was kicked out of there, and suddenly these Republican spines stiffened, and we got a great change in the Republican Party. Don't you think we did get a good change from the last election?
Well, I think we got a good change, but now it seems to be the leader is Dole, and I don't see any difference between he and Bush. And then Newt Gingrich has said that Franklin Roosevelt was one of his heroes. So.
Well, Reagan said that too. I don't think that these statements about their heroes are good, but I don't think it means a great deal. Of the current candidates, I don't think Gingrich is going to run. He's got too many negatives in his polls. Of these candidates today, if I had to choose between, I'd like Forbes the best myself.
Yeah, Steve Forbes is the only one that makes sense to me.
He makes sense on the little I know of him, but who only knows what's going to be in his program when you find out a little more. But at the moment, I would go for Forbes, but he has no realistic chance. If it comes down to Dole versus Clinton, if it comes down to that, I would have a very hard time making up my mind, because from one point of view, I would say I don't want to encourage this standard political moderate Republican type. I think Dole is a smidgen better than Bush. On the other hand, I don't want to see Clinton in again, whom I have the lowest opinion of. And I might very well sit it out unless one or the other does something super outrageous. But I would sit it out on the grounds of, well, it could work either way, and I can't argue that it has to be this way rather than that way. Maybe Dole with a Republican Congress would be less of an obstruction, and we would get some better legislation in. And on the other hand, maybe Clinton would galvanize the Republican opposition. And if they could get enough people, they would go even further. The standard to me is what is going to carry this revolution into some significant areas. Cut out the subsidies to all these groups. Start really reducing the size of the government, not just balancing it in 7 years, and try to judge on that basis. But I have to agree with you that there is not a very optimistic looking field. And right at this moment, I'm not campaigning for anybody. Thanks, Dave, and I'm sure we'll speak to you again, because I know who you are, Dave, but I'm being very straightforward here. I'm letting you preserve your anonymity, even though I'm telling the audience, in the interest of full disclosure, I know this gentleman. And as a matter of fact, when I've got him on the air, let me just tell you that this gentleman has been a friend of mine since I moved to California. He was my first friend in California, and he called to criticize me for a statement I made on my first show, when I came out with the statement, I am in favor of abortion. And Dave thought that sounded like I believed that abortion was a moral requirement every time a woman became pregnant. Obviously, I intended to say I am in favor of the right to abortion. And just as if I say I'm in favor of birth control, I do not mean it's your obligation. Even if you want children, you love children, and you're financially able to pay for them, you got to have birth control. So I meant it in that loose sense. But we don't want to speak loosely here on this show. We want to speak precisely. So thank you, Dave, for being the conscience of the show. And we look forward to your next correction. And thank you for calling. And now we've got Ben. Oh, now, Ben, I understand you do not think that liberals and conservatives are the same.
Well, let's put it this way, Doctor. It's really, the whole thing is really pretty much of a mess. For instance, Clinton, tomorrow night, in one of his responses to why we should be in Bosnia, Lake said it on the Brinkley thing today, more or less what Clinton's going to say. One of the main things is because we've seen on television the atrocities the last 3 years, people being killed, we have a moral obligation, besides defending NATO and all that, and national, to go in there and keep the peace and stop that war and stop the killing of the... Well, if that's the case, if that's one of the main criteria for going into Bosnia, the liberal